In this video, we're going to learn how to properly set up a distillation apparatus. Distillation is a method that we use to purify liquids that you'll be learning about in your next two lab periods. First, we're going to set up the simple distillation and then modify the simple distillation to set up a fractional distillation. As you've read about in your pre-lab and in your textbook, the simple distillation is very useful for when you're separating one liquid from solids or separating two liquids that have a difference in boiling point of more than 50 degrees. The fractional distillation is much more useful when you have two compounds that are more similar in boiling points. Over these next 2 weeks, you're going to be doing a simple distillation and a fractional distillation on the same mixture of liquids so that you can see the difference in these two techniques. In order to set up our distillation, we start with a round bottom flask that we're going to clamp onto our range stand. You should also notice that all of the glassware we're using in this experiment has ground glass joints, and you want to make sure that all of the joint sizes match so that you have a seal between all of your glassware. From here into your round bottom flask, I'm just going to put a liquid that we could be distilling. And then into our liquid, we want to put either a boiling stone or a stir bar. This is just to break up the boiling so that it does not overboil. In terms of a boiling stone, we just need 1 or 2, and we place those into our solution. From here, we add our distillation head and then our thermometer adapter. You may find the thermometer adapter in one piece, or you may find it in 2 pieces. This rubber adapter, this fits right on, and then your thermometer goes into your adapter. Be careful when you're putting your thermometer into the thermometer adapter, because if you attempt to put it in holding the thermometer far away from the rubber adapter, you will break your thermometer. So you want to hold the thermometer right at the rubber adapter and very carefully twist the thermometer or twist the adapter to get the thermometer in. You want the thermometer to be low enough so that it is about even with the side arm of the distillation head. Also, make sure the thermometer is pointing in a direction so that you can read it during your distillation. From here, you'll put a condenser onto your distillation head. In order for the condenser to stay on, you'll need a Keck clip. Since we're using 1922 joint sizes on this glassware, you want the blue Keck clips. The color of the Keck clip corresponds to the joint size. Now you may notice this is still not standing upright, so we're going to bring in a second ring stand and clamp that to the condenser. When you are clamping the condenser into place, though, you do want to be careful that you don't clamp it too tightly, because if you do try to clamp this too tightly, you will break the condenser. So now that we have our condenser clamped into place, we can continue with our setup. The next piece of equipment we need is the vacuum adapter. That just clips right onto the end of our condenser. Finally, we need something to collect our distillate in. In this experiment, you'll be using a 10 milliliter graduated cylinder, and you'll just position that below the vacuum adapter so that you can monitor the volume of distillate that's coming out. But in another case, we might just want to put a second round bottom flask, and we can also clip that into place. Now we've got our glassware set up. We need to finish setting up our condenser. We need 2 pieces of tubing, 1 on each outlet. This is so that we can have water flowing through our condenser, which will cool our hot distillate so that it condenses and is liquid when it comes into our collection flask. So we need one piece of tubing on each outlet of the condenser. And then if we had a sink here, the lower inlet would connect to the cold water faucet, and the outlet would drain into the sink. Finally, we need to set up our heating source. Unlike much of what you've learned in general chemistry, where you use Bunsen burners for heating, we will never use Bunsen burners in the organic lab because most organic compounds are highly flammable. So we'll use a heating mantle, which connects into a variac. Never plug your heating mantle directly into the wall. If you plug your heating mantle directly into the wall, you will find that you reach temperatures of well over 400 degrees, and you will get very poor results for your distillation. So the heating mantle plugs into the variac plugs into the outlet, and then we can lower our flask into the heating mantle to start our distillation. In this case, we might want to actually raise the heating mantle, and we can do that with a lab jack because we can't lower this distillation apparatus because of the collection flask. Now, you may also notice, if we come in closer here, our flask is a lot smaller than our heating mantle. And while optimally we'd like to have our heating mantle match the size of the flask, that's not always going to be possible. But we can still use this heating mantle. It's just once we've placed the round bottom inside the mantle, we then need to fill the rest of this space in with sand. So that is our setup for the simple distillation. And if we come back out to the full apparatus, we can now see how we modify a simple distillation apparatus into a fractional distillation. And as it turns out, the setup is very, very similar. What we just need is a fractionating column, and you may find the fractionating columns are already made up for you, or you may have to make them up yourself. If you have to make them up yourself, you'll just take another condenser and some of this stainless steel sponge and put an amount of that going through the condenser. When you're done, you should have a result that looks like this. You'll notice that the stainless steel sponge is in there, but it's not packed too tightly. If you pack it in too tightly, you won't get any distillate at all. So now we're ready to modify this to our fractional distillation setup. In order to do that, we're going to remove our round bottom flask, and now we put our fractionating column between the distillation head and our fractionating column. This also means that we will need to raise the height of our condenser. And now we are set up for a fractional distillation. There is one other issue we will need to account for in the fractional distillation, and that's the fact that because we now need to heat our solution up through a much larger volume of space, if we just run this distillation the way it's currently set up, it will take a much longer time. And so we're going to now insulate the fractionating column so it retains as much heat as possible, and it speeds up our distillation. To insulate that, we're going to take some glass wool. I would strongly recommend, if you're not wearing gloves at this point, you do not want to handle glass wool without gloves on. So we need some glass wool and some aluminum foil. And we're just going to start by wrapping the glass wool around our fractionating column. And we can go all the way up to where the thermometer is, and then wrap around that with some aluminum foil. Now we've successfully insulated our fractionating column and our fractional distillation will proceed much more quickly than it would without the insulation.